Have you ever thought about how trust can be the secret to growing your business? Well, we talk about that and more in this great episode that we have with us today. Welcome to the show. Carr and Claudia Betting are with you here in the studio. Claudia, can you introduce our guest?
Yeah, today we have Randy Hain on the podcast, and he's the founder of Serium Partners and co-founder of the Leadership Foundry. With over 30 years of senior leadership, talent development, and executive coaching for top global companies, he's also the award-winning author of 12 books, including The Practical Virtue and Essential Wisdom for Leaders of Every Generation.
Time with Randy is time well spent, and I thought we would, as we highlight things, I want you to listen for really three key questions and see if you can answer them. The first one is, can you say your professional purpose in one crisp sentence? Randy actually says his in 2 words, which is impressive. Listen to how he weaves that together. Second, almost everyone values trust, but is it part of your scalable system? Randy thinks about trust in terms of systems. It's fascinating, and you're going to learn a lot from that. And then third, have you ever thought about how generosity can be part of your growth strategy? It's a radical concept, and it's a great one. So sit back and enjoy this episode with Randy Hain. Well, Randy, welcome to the show. So glad to have you this morning. I'm excited about the work you do on leadership and helping leaders and business owners develop their teams. We're going to get into that, but I thought we'd first start with just your own journey. I know you were in corporate America for a long time, but then you did go out on your own. You've got 2 coaching businesses. First and foremost, do you consider yourself an entrepreneur, a self-employed business owner, a coach? Tell us a little bit about your journey to this point.
I think the answer is probably going to be yes, all those things. So I do a little bit of all of it. First and foremost, I think, Ken, and thanks for having me on the show, by the way. I think I identify first as a husband and a father. My family is really important to me. From a career perspective, UGA grad, went into business and spent 25 years in corporate America, worked my way up to senior executive roles, and spent 6 years leading operations for a big retailer here in Atlanta. Spent 4 years running the people function for Waffle House, which is a great experience. Because of that, I'm not afraid of anything. Then I spent 13 years as the managing partner and co-owner of a national executive search firm. And all those experiences were amazing, and each one of them was a bit of a pit stop on the learning journey. After 25 years of doing that, I think I'd known this for a while, but I really felt drawn to doing just executive coaching. I just felt led to do it. I've always been a coaching style leader, and it was a very natural transition for me to start my first company, Serium Partners, in 2012. And all I do is executive coaching for Fortune 5,000 companies and their teams. And then I co-founded another business called the Leadership Foundry with Brandon Smith. And we started that company about 8 years ago. And we do leadership development for executive teams and cohorts of leaders for global companies. And we've got about 12 or 13 coaches that work for us in that business. So I love what I do, and it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that I think you've always had that cadence, but you've really been able to optimize it. Well, just in that move, so you were in the corporate world for about 25 years, but yet you've brought so many principles in a way that accelerates your leadership coaching because you've been there, you've done that. Was it an easy transition to do, to be building your own business and having it be funded and you were able to just move into it? Was that an easy transition just because your experience already took you there?
I'll tell you what, this may be a contrarian answer for you to hear.
Yeah.
I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not.
Yeah.
In fact, I was really nervous. My wife's a stay-at-home mom. We've got 2 sons. My oldest son has autism and lives with us. We've always made it a priority for my wife to be home and take care of our son. And I was the one who was the primary breadwinner. And in that scenario, I could not afford to take a lot of risk. But I knew that I was being led to do this coaching business. I loved it. It's what I felt God was calling me to do, and I just felt led to do it. So I did take a risk, but it was a mitigated risk. I interviewed about 20 people in the business community who I knew and knew me well, and I just wanted to run the idea by them of, if I started this coaching company, would that interest you? Do you think it's a good idea? From those 20 people, 19 of them said, I'd buy from you. I would hire you to work with us. The one person that didn't was retiring and said, I'd love to, but I'm about to leave the business world. So I knew that I had an audience that was very receptive to what Serium Partners was offering. So I took that leap of faith and I started it, and I've never looked back. But I just wanted you to know at the beginning, I was very risk averse and nervous.
Yeah. You did, in your own way, your market research, right? You validated the demand. You knew you didn't have to have hundreds of clients. You needed enough to at least support a transition. And the rest is history. Congrats. I know you've helped many in that regard. Love to hear that story. Let's go ahead and pivot to your work with developing leaders and leadership teams. I know you've worked with large global brands, but you've also worked with some smaller companies. I'm curious, ultimately, if the principles are the same. I imagine they are. But a lot of where you start is defining what success looks like and helping the leader define what that is as a starting point. And that resonates with me because that's how we start with business owners and entrepreneurs as well. First and foremost, why do you start there? Why is that important to define what success personally and professionally looks like? Why is that important to start there?
I think one of the worst mistakes anybody in my line of work can make is to superimpose on somebody else what we think success looks like. So I think it always begins with listening, curiosity and listening. When I meet people for the first time, I'm very curious. I ask a lot of questions and I'm really listening to you. And I really want to make sure that I've got a sense of what matters. What are your priorities? What are the things that really matter now, 5 years from now, 50 years from now? I really want to understand what it is that you're trying to get to. And it's okay if you don't have all those answers. We'll figure that out. But I think it has to begin with asking good questions and listening. And once you've put everything on the table in front of me, and I feel like you've really exhausted everything that's on your mind, I can then look at my experiences. But one of the things, Cannon, that I think is really important is it's not enough to know where you're going. It's really important that you understand the obstacles between you and the success that you'd like to achieve. And as a coach and a leadership consultant and a writer, I'm really focused on removing obstacles to success. So as I think about my clients, my most successful clients, is it started out with a really open conversation about where you're going, understanding what's in the way, and then working with me diligently to remove those obstacles. So that's a really simplistic view, but that's how I do it. That's how I think about it.
I imagine that process requires making the leader who's engaging with you feel uncomfortable. Is that a fair, not like literally uncomfortable, but taking them to places of, I mean, if you're going to uncover what obstacles are, how do you do that? And does it make them uncomfortable?
Yeah, listen, discomfort is always part of the journey. If you're looking for someone to validate everything that you're thinking and make you feel really good, you're not really looking for executive coaching. You're not really looking for the kind of experience that I would bring. So it doesn't have to be horrific or scary, but we do have to be willing to get outside of that comfort zone. So there are a couple of ways we can do it. There are a number of tests out there. I'm rather fond of the Berkman assessment, which really helps us understand stress. I do a very robust 360 interview process. So I'm going to interview 15 to 20 people around you, and these are real interviews, and you'll get their anonymous feedback, and I will help you interpret what that raw verbatim feedback is, what it's telling us, because how people perceive you is their reality, right? So understanding that perspective is incredibly helpful. And after I've spent time with you, we've used whatever the appropriate assessment is, and I've got the 360 data, I can then help you put together a very robust and very customized development plan that we'll work against for the remainder of our engagement. So that's really how we do it. It starts with data. It starts with, again, questions and listening. But once we've got all of that, it's fairly simple to map out a strategy that's customized to Can and Carr that would work for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are some of your favorite questions, just personally, to ask an owner to uncover goals, values, those things?
There's a lot of questions I ask. One of the most important questions to ask someone when we're doing a chemistry interview, and it may sound really basic, but are you coachable? Are you at a place in your life where you're truly open to going through an experience like this? Because I think that's the first question you have to be able to honestly answer. Because if you're not, this may not be the right time for you. This may not be the right experience for you. But as we get to know each other, let me give you just a small sampler platter. I'm a big believer in the integrated approach to coaching. So we've got to be able to talk about family, work, life outside of work, faith, whatever it is that matters to you. It's not just about work, it's all integrated. So one of my favorite questions is before we sit down and go into our work session or coaching session, I'm going to start with Cannon, how's life outside of work for you? How's the non work version of you? Tell me about that. And I want to hear that, hey, my kids are doing great. My daughter's got the flu. My wife's got COVID. We're taking a trip to Paris next week. Whatever is on your mind, it's important for me to understand what you're willing to share. You don't have to share everything, but that helps me get a glimpse of the non work version of you because, again, it's all related. As we're working together, I'm a big believer in being very specific in my questions. So I'm not going to say, hey, Cannon, you doing well? Everything good? Because I'll get a worthless answer.
Yeah.
I'm fine. Everything's okay. I might ask you something like, Cannon, if there were two things that you're trying to do better this quarter versus last quarter, what would those two things be? If there was one way that you feel like your team could get more out of you as a leader, what do you think that might be? And I encourage my leaders, my clients, to do the same. Be really specific when you're asking for feedback. Don't be generic.
Do you find a lot of owners at the start of this process ignore the non-work version of themselves?
That's a great question, but my answer is a little mixed based on my experience. I know a lot of entrepreneurs who I really admire who do an amazing job of having the right priorities. Their focus is on family, faith, health, and they've got this great business they love, and they find a way to do it all in an integrated way, and priorities are very clear. But I also meet entrepreneurs that have this idea, this dream, this vision, and I don't fault them for this, but they're so single-minded in their focus that they really put everything else on the back burner so they can build the business. Now, that's your choice. It's a free country, but I would argue that's not healthy at all. So I meet both, some that had the balance figured out and some that chase this dream for a period of time. But there's going to be a sacrifice. Typically, something can't thrive unless something is diminished. And you've got to ask yourself, what am I giving up to grow my business? And you've really got to be clear, am I willing to make that sacrifice?
Yeah. That's an interesting word, sacrifice, right? Because in some respects, that's to make your business a success, you do make sacrifices. And I guess the question is it intentional or accidental that you come back and realize you didn't intend to make? Do you find ultimately personal definition of success and business success converge in the right way? And do you have to force that, or is it hard to ultimately reconcile those two?
I love that question. And the first thing that popped into my mind is a really brief story, because I think the way to connect success, to really define success, is to connect it to your purpose or your vision. I want to tell you what my purpose statement is, my mission statement, but I want to tell you this quick story. When I started my new company, Serium, back in 2012, I was meeting with a brand new coaching client. And at the time, she was the COO of a very large nonprofit. You would know the nonprofit, it's pretty well known. And at the time, she was in her mid-30s, MBA, and one of those people who makes coffee nervous. Have you been around people that are really edgy all the time?
Oh, sure.
So, a wonderful person, but just very edgy. And I'm usually very calm, so it was an interesting mix. So she walks into our second meeting. We were meeting at Rome and Dunwoody. And she walks in and slams down on the table a 2-page document. And she pointed at it and said, with her finger in my face, Randy, before we get started, I want to talk about mission statements today. And before I tell you about mine, I want to hear what yours is. I'm like, okay, I'll tell you mine. So she gets out her notebook and she's ready to take notes on what she thinks is going to be this really long discourse on my mission statement. I said, you don't have to write it down. It's only 2 words. No, Randy, I need your mission statement.
Yeah.
And she kept arguing with me.
Yeah.
So I finally said, I'm about to leave the meeting if you don't stop. I will tell you, but just be quiet. So she calmed down and said, okay, here's my mission. Serve others. I said, listen, the way I was raised by my parents, my life experiences, and absolutely my faith have all taught me that when I serve others, I get everything that I need. So I have oriented my marriage, my fatherhood, my coaching, my community service work, all under the umbrella of serving other people. So I can tell you in 2 words exactly how I live, run my business, live my life. I'm super clear about it, and it's very simple. So I said, let me test you. And I took her document and I flipped it over. Tell me your mission statement. And Cannon, she said something like, I live at the intersection of this and I'm at the nexus of that. I'm like,
Right.
Stop. I don't know what that means. It sounded like a master's thesis. So that day we got her from 2 pages down to 6 sentences. She's become a really good friend, and today she's down to 5 words.
Wow.
My point is this: a very simple and clear understanding of your mission and purpose is exactly the right way to really have a clear vision of success. That's my opinion.
Is there a way to compress that into a 30-minute meeting, or is in reality it's a journey and it takes time?
That was the second of what would be 12 coaching sessions. That typically my 6-month coaching engagements are 12 sessions. And we spent a fair bit of time during our sessions talking about it. So we were able to help her whittle it down. But one of the things that really was difficult for her was abandoning complexity where it wasn't necessary and embracing simplicity. I'm a big believer in simplicity. I don't know about you. I suspect this is how you're wired too. I read leadership books. I study. I love news. I'm a news junkie. I love data. But all of that has taught me you want to keep things simple, practical, actionable. If you read my books, for instance, each chapter is 5 minutes. Their best practice is focused. When you get done reading it, you'll know exactly how to go apply that in your life. That's how I think, and that's how I try to work with my clients.
Yeah, that kind of clarity is game changing, but it takes effort.
Hey there, it's Claudia, producer of Business Owner Tales from the Trenches. Just a quick break to say, if today's conversation is striking a chord, don't forget to visit candid-carr.com. You'll find key takeaways from this episode, deeper resources, and you can download Cannon's 3 R's framework, a powerful tool for navigating the toughest moments in business. Again, that's candid-carr.com. Now back to the conversation.
Once you get that, what I call the North Star established, how does that help guide you in decisions and saying yes to the right things and no to the right things?
I've actually read books on what you just asked me, and I'm not sure I've ever seen a really clear answer. I can only tell you from an intuitive perspective how it works for me. I think I've developed like this sixth sense over the years. What's a good client for me? What's a good engagement for me? What's a good person to go into business with? My values have to align. My business partner, Brandon, he and I have really similar values. I trust him with my life, my family. He would say the same about me. So going into business with someone, you've got to be really clear about that. When I work with a client, I'm really looking to make sure that you're someone that's really committed to growth, that you're willing to have and want to have candid conversations, that you're willing to look in the mirror and you're willing to make changes. And also that you're a person that I'm not asking for you to have a perfect set of values. You don't have to be at the summit of living an ethical life, but I want to make sure that you're interested in doing the right thing. I want my clients to be open and interested and willing to grow in that area. When I find that recipe, when I'm working with someone, that's usually a great fit for me, and that's usually a very successful client relationship. And going back to what you asked me earlier, it all starts with getting to know people, right?
Yeah.
Let's get to know each other. Tell me about your background. Let me tell you about mine.
Yeah.
And the more you're engaged, by the time the hour has gone around, you have a good sense of who this person is. What really matters to you in life probably tells you a lot about that person.
Yeah.
And again, I am not afraid to say no to a client prospect if I don't think I'm going to be a good fit for them. I say yes most of the time, but I have said no because we just didn't align in the right way.
Yeah. You're starting with what success looks like, to me, sets the path so that now you can start making the choices and establish the right priorities and figure out what to say no to so that you create simplicity out of chaos. A lot of work I think you do is helping leaders build the team underneath them to create that success, that vision of personal fulfillment, but also business success. So let's walk through a little bit about that and what you've learned about helping a leader build what I focus on is those entrepreneurs who are looking to scale a business and build the business that goes beyond them. And in that process, it becomes more than just about you, the founder, right? It's about the team that you're building. Walk us through a little bit about what you've learned about helping leaders build that kind of team.
Sure. Now, typically, I'm going to be working with leaders in established companies, but I do work with smaller businesses, more entrepreneurial businesses as well. I would say 5 million to 50 billion is the range for me. But I think leaders need to start with a really basic understanding that people work for people, not businesses. Even if they say they're very focused on money, if they say they're focused on your product, if they're focused on your vision, there may be some truth to that. But at the end of the day, people work for people. So you as a leader really need to make sure, am I establishing trust with this person? Do I have trust with them? How do you do that? My business partner would define that as a trust formula. He talks a lot about this idea of authenticity plus vulnerability multiplied by credibility is what yields trust.
I love that.
So am I being authentic? Am I being vulnerable? Do I have credibility with them and do they have it with me? So I think building a trusting relationship with people, again, we go back to curiosity and listening. Am I really interested in what your needs are? Am I making sure that as much as I value the talent on your resume, do I really know what drives you? Do I know what matters to Ken and Carr? Do I really have a sense of what you'd like to accomplish in life? And am I willing to support you in meeting those goals? Because it's not about just meeting the team goals or the company goals. That's important. But I need to make sure that you feel like you're invested, like you're going to get something out of this as well. So I need to listen to you. I need to be a supporter of you. I need to help you activate your own development, trust and relationship, curiosity and listening, being willing to invest in your development, and then a commitment to you that we're always going to be able to have candid conversations in a safe way. I write about extensively respectful candor. I write about it all the time. We have to be willing to have honest, open, and direct conversations with each other. And you need to always feel safe saying what you really think in front of me. And I need to be able to do this. I think if you can touch on all of those things I've just named, you have built a foundation for people to thrive on your team. You're going to attract people to your team that are really going to be successful. I just wrote a blog post this past Sunday about building your own tribe. And I made reference to leaders that build great cultures, that are willing to be focused on excellence and fairness and a willingness to invest in people. If you're focused on those things, you're likely going to be able to build a great team and a great organization. So again, there's no one way to do it, but when I think about successful leaders, those are the elements that typically exist.
That's awesome. So what you're talking about is investing in culture, right? And building that culture. And if you do have to have that candor in those hard conversations, how do you help leaders, or how do you see the best leaders maintain a healthy culture, but at the same time have what can sometimes be a tough conversation?
I am going to share with your listeners right now the permission rules.
Okay.
And this is the absolute best way to activate the practice of candor on your team. So would you agree with me, Cannon, that if I am candid at you and you don't receive what I say and act on it, that's a failure on my part? Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah.
So instead of me just being candid in your general direction, I might say something like this. Cannon, look, I want to share an observation with you about this meeting we had with a client yesterday. Are you open to some feedback? May I share that with you? Now, I've been doing that for 24 years, and no one's ever said no to me politely, respectfully asking for permission to share an observation. So once I've gotten your permission, then I have an obligation to walk through the door that you open and be helpful and constructive. So let me model the wrong way and the right way.
Okay.
Let's say you give me permission, and the first thing I say is, hey, you really stunk yesterday. That was terrible. Never do that again. I blew it. You're going to shut me down. But what if I said, hey, amazing job yesterday. I noticed one thing in the presentation. I think some of the data you've got is a little outdated. I've got the new numbers. Would you like me to help you change out that slide? If you'll send me that slide, I'll change it for you, and then you'll have the correct data. I just wanted to offer that as if that would be helpful for you. I identified an issue, I offered to help, and I was constructive. So asking permission about anything that you want to share is difficult. When you get it, then it becomes a two-way conversation and not me talking at you. So I bet every leader assumes that people already know that they welcome candor. And I'm here to tell you that they do not. People do not know that they've got permission to be candid. They don't. You may think they do, but they don't. They have to be reminded. So let me model the right way and the wrong way to do it.
Okay.
So let's say I'm in a meeting with you and some other team members, and I stop at the door on the way out and I turn around and say, hey guys, if you ever want to tell me what you're really thinking, I'd love to hear from you. Have a good day, guys. That does not sound very sincere. It doesn't sound authentic. But what if I, in my one-on-ones or in a group setting, said something like this? Listen, everybody, I don't know what I don't know, and I really need to hear from you. I'm really asking you to come find me, pull me aside, tell me what you're really thinking, because I want to get better as a leader, but I can't do it without your input. Please do me that favor. If my boss said that to me, I'm all in. Give permission, ask permission. If you do that well, if you're listening to this podcast, you will absolutely be 50% of where you need to be with candor.
That's amazing. And I love you use the word at several times. I'm going to be candor at you, which to me feels confrontational, right? In other words, I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking and I'm going to hammer you down on the head with it. Of course, it's going to make you defensive, right? So I loved candor at. Maybe it's candor with, or maybe it's two-way conversation. I love how you either ask for permission or get permission, but then have a two-way conversation. Let me just ask, some people say, hey, Randy, that sounds pretty soft, right? How am I going to enforce standards if I'm constantly trying to not be defensive and keep them from not feeling threatened? Because sometimes a threat works. Sometimes you've come to a point in a contentious position where you need to break something. How do you respond to that?
So I'm going to fall back on something that I think I've earned and you've earned, which is to speak from a place of longevity. We both have been in business a very long time, correct? Fear works on a short-term basis. You can yell, you can scream, you can scare the bejesus out of someone on your team. And in that moment, you're likely going to get the result that you want, but it's got a very short shelf life. That person will think you're a jerk. That person will be unhappy. That person will, quite frankly, not want to work around someone like you if that's how you need to lead. And they are going to start dusting off their resume and they will leave you for greener pastures.
Yeah.
If you operate from fear, if you lead from fear, you will be effective in the short term, but it's not the game that successful long-term leaders play for the long term. It may take a little more effort to play the permission rules. I will tell you something though, you don't have to use the permission rules if you've got trusting relationships with your team. If I know you, Cannon, and we've worked together, we've been in the trenches together, and we're in the heat of battle, and if I say something to you that's really direct, hey buddy, we got to drop everything and go make this happen, I probably don't need to use the permission rules with you every time because I've earned the right to speak candidly with you. So that's another element of this. If you've earned the right, you can get away with that.
I love it. That's playing the long game. Are you playing a short-term game or a long-term game? And as a leader, building a sustainable company, you have to, or a corporate executive, right? Building a brand that people trust, you have got to be playing the long-term game. I often think about it in terms, if you're playing a short-term game and you're never going to see this person again, you can do whatever you want, right? But there are no repercussions. But if there's going to be a second time, a third time you're interacting together, suddenly you're on a journey together. And I love how you've couched and phrased that.
I think
That's
I
awesome.
added that, Cannon, if I may, is I wrote a blog post at the end of last year about leaders who coach drive the best engagement. So I did some research last year, and Gallup had a survey that said 2/3 of US-based employees are disengaged at work. However, the very best engagement came from teams who were led by coaching-oriented leaders. So if you want to build greater engagement, adopt the style of the coaching leader. The post I wrote is on LinkedIn if you want to find it. Focused on developing coaching, engaging with your people. You're going to get them more engaged, which gives you a better output, which gives you the success that you're probably trying to achieve.
How do you know that it's working?
I think surveys are certainly somewhat helpful, but I'm a big believer in the old school method. Check in with your people.
Okay.
When I was a leader of large teams, I would do weekly check-ins. I think today's one-on-one is a travesty. I think a lot of leaders sit down and all they want to do is talk about, did you make your numbers? Why aren't you making your numbers? What are you going to do to make your numbers? Instead of actually saying, hey, Cannon, let's just have 15 minutes. How are you doing? What's going on with you? How are you feeling? How are things outside of work right now? What can I do to support you better right now? How are you doing with your goals? Instead of just waiting for the HR-driven survey at the end of the quarter, as a leader, you have an obligation to check in with your folks. And if you run a bigger team in a bigger company, you should train and develop your leaders under you to do the same down into the organization. So I think it's ongoing conversation. Remember the old management by walking around?
Yeah.
There's still some merit to that, even in corporate America today, in any kind of company.
Does that principle work no matter what type of skill worker you have, whether it's a knowledge-based worker, a field laborer, part-time temporary help? Does that work across all spectrum?
I'll give you an example. So yeah, it runs the gamut. My older son, Alex, is 27 and he has high functioning autism. He works for a global retailer based in Atlanta, and orange is their favorite color. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
So he is a part-time hourly associate. His management team routinely checks in with him. How are you doing? How are things going? Alex, now he is the lowest man on the totem pole, but he gets routinely checked in with because this company really values leadership and they lead from the bottom up. So yes, I think it applies to every position, every type of organization.
And last question here. So what you're talking about is motivation too, right? So what ultimately motivates people? How do you help leaders set goals here? Because you mentioned it, right? Hey, are you achieving your numbers? How come you're short here? Numbers, you're not hitting your numbers. That's a different conversation than something that may have ultimately the same outcomes, but is a different type of goals. Can you put a little context around setting goals and motivation?
Sure. So yeah, as a business, we are here to generate profits. The goals, the numbers, the metrics, all of that has to be done. But this is the thing that I think we sometimes miss as leaders. So if you're trying to motivate, inspire, and engage your team, you need to find a way to connect what matters personally, the people around you, to the metrics. So yeah, we've got to increase revenue by 10% this year. Bill and Susan on the team are hardworking, but maybe they're not quite getting to their goals. Instead of berating them, being candid at them and trying to scare them into making their numbers, why don't we start with, hey, Bill, tell me a little bit about what's going on with you. We've got a really big year ahead of us. What are some ideas you've got on how we can actually get to that number? Is there anything that we should be doing that we're not doing? Hey, Susan, last year you crushed your numbers. This year you seem a little off. Is there anything going on with you that I can help you with? You see where I'm going with this?
Totally. You're empowering them to help come up with a solution, be open and candid. And you've built a culture where I know if I speak, it's not going to be punitive in and of itself, although I may have to pay a consequence in some way in terms of performance. But I guess that's part of the feedback, right?
What's the old meme that's out there? The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Yeah.
So instead of the same old, let's beat them over the head, why don't we sit down and say, how are you doing? What's going on with you? Hey, and I love this question that so few leaders ask. Hey, what are we not doing right now that we should be doing?
Yeah.
If you could change one thing about how our team is operating, what do you think it would be? I especially like asking that question of Gen Z because I just wrote a book about helping Gen Z and early career professionals called Practical Virtue.
Yeah.
Because I think our generation has got to find a way to tap into their skills, their talents, their understanding of technology. Let's stop wagging our finger at them and let's learn from them. I love to get the newest person on the team to tell me what they see. That's an invaluable source of info that probably is going to give us a perspective that we don't have.
Let's just spend 1 or 2 minutes on what that onboarding process looks like. We've recruited teammates that we hope expand our skill set, cover our weaknesses as a founder. What does the onboarding process into this culture look like?
So I think it's going to range, quite frankly, on the size of the organization. I'm an entrepreneur and I've got a team of 10. That's a fairly easy process of making sure the new person understands the vision, the culture. They're meeting everybody, they're building relationships. They're assigned to someone that can be their buddy and mentor them and help them acclimate to the work. So for a smaller business, it's easy and very familial. Okay. In a bigger organization, sometimes an onboarding process can feel like a checklist. It can be very
Totally.
clinical. Yeah. So if I'm the leader of a team and I've got someone new starting in a bigger organization, I'm going to make darn sure that I spend plenty of time with them in the early weeks, early months, that they know from me, these are the most important relationships that you've got to be forming. And I'm going to actively introduce you to every one of them, and you've got to go spend time with them. And I'm going to make really sure that you've got at least a couple of people that are looking over your shoulder and there to help you. So, on a bigger scale, getting someone onboarded and successful should be one of your primary missions.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear the biggest versus the smaller and how they're a little bit different or the same and whatnot. All right. The last part of this segment, I want to talk a little bit just about how you market, how you develop your thought leadership. I was going to ask you, you put clients, you have this reputation. I can see it just in my interaction with you. You're so authentic in putting clients first. I was going to ask you how you do that, but you've demonstrated that through this whole interview. So I think you've already answered my question there. But I did want to pivot to, I think you've written 12 books now. You just mentioned Practical Virtue. I've got one on my shelf now, Becoming a More Thoughtful Leader. Tell us a little bit about the book writing process, and does it come easy? And do you recommend it to smaller business owners who are trying to build a business? Is there some way that publishing or something can help them market, tell their story, be authentic?
I love your question.
Good. And well done, by the way, on correcting the pivot.
So let me pivot to your pivot now.
Yeah.
So I think they're actually connected. Now, I want to say this, and I want you to know that it comes from how I was raised. It comes from how I've observed successful leaders, and it also is informed by my faith. I believe in the abundance mentality versus the scarcity mindset. Stephen Covey wrote about that years ago. But when you think about abundance, you are the steward of your gifts. You don't actually own anything. You're the steward of gifts. So when I think about my business, my first inclination, and I learned this from my mother especially, God rest her soul, she was such a wonderful woman, but she was the most giving person I ever met. So she led with generosity. So I lead with generosity. I give away everything. I give away my content. I will tell you what I really think. I'm not holding back with you today. What do you want to know? And this makes a lot of people nervous because, oh my gosh, why aren't you charging for that? Why aren't you charging more for your books? Why aren't you charging more for whatever? I find that if you operate from an abundance and generosity mindset, just try giving it away, because you know what? People that will read your work will want to hire the guy that wrote the book. They'll want to come engage with you because they really appreciated what you shared in the blog post, in the book, in the talk you gave away, in the podcast you did with Can and Carr. So I think what gets people in trouble, this is my opinion, Cannon, it's just my one man's opinion. If we spend most of our day worrying about getting compensated for everything that we do, it's ultimately going to put us in a place that's difficult to extract ourselves from, because we're so worried about making fees that we forgot to go win friends and followers and clients. So I believe in leading by giving it away. My wife always asks me, where do all the royalty checks go from your books? I buy books to give away. I probably give away more than I sell. If I go to a college campus, I'll give them away by the case. I want you to have my book because I believe in this and I want you to read it. I want you to read my blogs. They really tell you what I think. So I'm trying to answer your question with this very clear idea. Lead with generosity, start by giving it away, act from abundance. And you know what? The work will be blessed and you will get everything that you're looking for. That's my experience. I can name a lot of the leaders who do the same.
Yeah.
We have a mutual friend who does that. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's a great way to live.
The person you mentioned does do that. I imagine the people who you mentioned who I'm not even aware of yet do that. And I know you do that. And just leading by generosity is a wonderful frame of mind, a wonderful way to live. So thank you for highlighting that. Does that principle, can that still work to the founder who's back in the trenches just trying to get profitability going?
Sure. So again, there is a balance, and don't misread this. If I was running a business where I was making widgets, I understand from a business perspective, I can't give away all the widgets. At some point, I've got to get paid for the widgets. And I don't give away everything that I do, but my intellectual capital, my thought leadership, I absolutely give away.
Yeah.
Because that's a way for you to get to know me, which may lead you to want to engage with me as a coach, as a consultant. Now, I still give away some of the coaching and leadership consulting work. I may get to know you and just invest time in a conversation, but eventually I've got to charge for the work I do. So if you're an entrepreneur, a business owner right now listening to the podcast, you've got to find that healthy balance. Absolutely, if you produce a product, you can't just give away all the products. Charging a fair fee, doing things with integrity, I think that's built into owning a healthy business. But I do think if you lead with, let me get to know you, I want to understand your needs, I want to do what I can to serve you. And if your business does have profitability and maybe you use some of those proceeds to invest in the community, I'm always looking for that symbiotic way for us to be in business, but also do the right thing.
Yeah.
Because by giving my books away, by serving the community, being on nonprofit boards, and being a business owner, the symbiosis of that I love. And quite frankly, I can't think of any other way to live.
Yeah, I love it because we're exploring that space where, because I totally agree with you, the generosity, you benefit first and foremost, just personally with your own mission. I feel the same way with the work I do. And yet at the same time, you're helping the other person too. But I love, we're trying to make that important recognition that profits are good, right? By making money, you create jobs, you create a product that's valued in the marketplace, and more money gives you more ability to expand the business. So all that's good. But leading from the point of generosity, like you were saying, just that intellectual capital, that thought leadership, not only makes the world a better place, it's that authentic space where you're being your genuine self and engaging those conversations. Some of them will come back around to you in terms of a revenue paying client, but that's good. But you've made the world a better place.
Doesn't this go back to the story I told you earlier about the nonprofit COO? If your mission is clearly serve others, if you begin with, how can I help? Versus, my time is valuable. You have to, I've got to charge you for that hour you want from me.
Yeah.
Led with, how can I help you?
I love it.
Now, again, if I'm selling a widget and it's a product on the shelf, it's a different conversation. But again, if the customer is out there, let's engage with them. Let's listen to them. Let's learn about them. And let's try to offer something that meets their unique needs. That's always, hopefully, the mindset of anybody that wants to go into business and be successful.
Yeah. This is awesome. Randy, thank you. Your thought leadership is just a powerful force for good, but also helps us all be our better selves. If people want to learn more about your work, what's the best way for them to do that? And you've mentioned a couple of things which we'll put in the show notes too, like the blog post recently and the books you've mentioned. But how do people learn more?
Thank you. I think there are probably three main ways. LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, mention the show. I blog every Sunday typically. Amazon has all my books. You're welcome to go check them out there. And then Serium Partners is my website. You can also link to blogs and learn about my work, and also learn about my books there. So those are probably the three main places to find me.
Randy, awesome. So thank you so much for spending time with us on the show today, and you've given us wonderful things to center on. Welcome back to the studio. Cannon and Claudia with you. Claudia, this was what I'll say was deep thought leadership about leadership.
Yeah, absolutely.
Randy just spends a lot of time thinking and doing there in such a great way. And as you know, we work a lot with owners about getting their narrative right. And Randy offers a playbook because that's what he does too. How do you get your narrative right? And a lot of this episode was him just simply offering his playbook about how do you build your narrative through a thoughtful process and through thoughtful questions. So we won't highlight that here. It's such a great documented resource for you. But first, Claudia, we'll cover the three takeaways from this episode. But first, why don't you share a little bit just what you thought was interesting?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite story that Randy told, I really feel embodies who he is as a leader. And that's when he was asked what his mission is. And he said, you don't even need to write this down. It's easy to remember. It's 2 words, serve others. And that really seems to embody who Randy is. And so I just love that story.
Serve others. And it permeates everything he does. And 2 words, right? I challenge owners to come up with just a sentence, right? Yeah. And we do that for ourselves. It's hard work. But it's a wonderful thing that he's done and a great observation. And that actually sets up our first point we thought we'd summarize, which is, Randy has built a business that is deeply linked and integrated with his narrative. And that narrative encompasses his mission, his purpose, the lifestyle preferences that he's chosen. One of them is to fulfill that mission of serving others. It's very clear. It governs everything he does. But he also talked about freedom of time as part of his narrative.
Yeah, he talks about wanting to have that time to spend with his family, especially with his son with autism. And I think that's so valuable, obviously. And I know that he's even translated that into advocacy work. And so obviously making that such a priority was so needed for him. And I love that it also ties in with his mission of serving others.
Yeah, serve others, freedom of time. And there was a third thing that I heard him say in his narrative too, and that was his interest in stability. He wanted to be more in control of his time and his lifestyle, and he wanted a more stable business that fit what he wanted to do. And you remember he said he interviewed 20 people before leaving, 19 of whom said, I would hire you, right?
Yep.
And the other one was about to retire. I bet he would have hired him too. So Randy did his market research, but more importantly, confirmed before he left, he pre-validated that this book of business would sustain him, but he kept it personal, kept it to the right size so he could create intimate relationships on his terms. So wonderful example of how narrative drives the business and the personal balance. The second thing we wanted to highlight was just that concept of trust being a scalable system. For Randy, it's not an abstract concept. It's an operational concept. And he talked about two principles about how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, he has that formula of authenticity plus vulnerability times credibility that he uses for everything.
Yeah, so he said his partner, business partner, was the one who built that principle. And if you think about it, for authenticity, don't be false, right?
Yep.
The vulnerability, be open to criticism, feedback, and third, credibility. That's the multiplier effect.
Right.
Are you believable, right? But if you combine those three, that is a key thing in his view for building trust. There was a second one too. Do you remember what that tool was?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like a quiz.
To have candor with permission, to use to diminish that defensiveness and to unarm the people that you're talking
Candor
about.
with permission. So, and he talks about doing 360 feedback too, right? And he has tools to do that. But if you can create an environment where people aren't defensive and are willing to share and have hard conversations, that actually amplifies trust.
Right.
So, a wonderful scalable system. And what that means when you're able to build a system of trust like that, you reduce friction, which means you make faster and better decisions, and you reduce risk, right? And we talk a lot with business owners. How do you reduce risk in your business? Reducing risk through open and candid communication, reduces error. So it's wonderful. So, we ask you, what's your system for building scalable trust? The third thing I thought we'd highlight is just that concept of generosity as a long-term growth strategy. He talks about giving from a place of abundance. And it seems weird. A lot of people are like, why would I generously give away things about my business? But with his mindset of serving others first and helping first, it's not about sales. It's about building that relationship.
Right.
But of course, you do want to have a productive business relationship. So it is about exchange of money and that value, but you're not leading with sales, right? You are leading with generosity.
Well, and that reminded me so much of our first guest we ever had on the podcast, Mo Bunnell, who has an entire system called Give to Grow. We have the book because it's such a great methodology of getting those sales. But also it is out of a place of genuinely wanting to help. And so kind of figuring out how those two converge.
So two great examples there of generosity helping to grow. From shout out to Mo Bunnell, but also certainly the work Randy does. And then, also just in the concept of generosity, it helps you, with if you've got a mindset of generosity, and the people who interact with you have the same mindset, you're choosing to work with people either in your firm or as clients who have aligned values like that, and it leads to mutual respect. And again, that's just part of the system that Randy's building. It reminded me of another episode. You know which one?
Yeah, it has to be Glenn Jackson with his values, right? I mean, again, he always, Glenn's episode 5, if you want to go back and listen, definitely worth it. And talking about having that mutual respect for your team that you're building, and making those values the center of everything you do. It reminded me a lot of what Randy was talking about.
So shout out to Glenn, but again, resonates with Randy, and all these guys know each other, by the way, so no surprise. But, so we ask, where could you be more generous in a way that still aligns with your boundaries and your goals? But where would generosity fit into your business and help you in an authentic way grow? All right. So those 3 points were great. We talked about clarity of purpose. We talked about trust as an operating system and generosity as a strategy. Just great concepts to think about as you grow and sustain your business. If you do want to learn more about the underpinnings of these questions, the way we think, it's the 3 R's framework. You can check it out at canon-carr.com. We've got downloadable resources there for you that'll kind of expound on some of these things we've talked about today. But we appreciate you tuning in with us today.